Good evening y bienvenidos to Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices. I'm Hugo Balta, WTTW News Director and your host. On the show tonight, the 2020 presidential election is in the home stretch. Though the majority of Latino vote Democratic, about a third are planning to vote for Donald Trump. We'll hear from two local supporters on the reasons behind their votes. Home is the safest place during the pandemic, but for victims of domestic violence, it's anything but. We'll talk to social service workers about what they're hearing in their communities.
Everybody. Only 3-4 minutes in the bar, I go to vámonos.
And this is our feel-good story of the night. We check in on Claudio Velez, a.k.a. the Tamale Guy, who's recovering from COVID-19. But first, top stories from the week. Cases of COVID-19 in Chicago took an alarming rise of 30% over the last week. Thursday, Chicago Department of Public Health Commissioner Dr. Allison Arwady joined Latino officials to provide an update on the progress of the city's COVID-19 community outreach. Arwady says the recent spread has been associated not with congregate settings like work or school, but small gatherings.
More than 90% of our cases are just associated with spread among family members, among close friends, among neighbors, really within households.
The 2020 U.S. Census is officially over after the Supreme Court rules that the Trump administration could end field operations 2 weeks early. Though civil rights groups believe the Trump administration's intent was to limit the counting in Black and Brown communities, Illinois Census Director Oswaldo Alvarez struck an optimistic tone. With a few hours to go on Thursday, he said the $12 million used to promote participation in Illinois' Latino communities were well spent.
And today, we are at 71.3% self-response rates, which surpasses our 2010 numbers, and we're still going.
The countdown to Election Day is on. Early voting began in all 50 wards of the cities this week, with just over 2 weeks to go until November 3rd. The city says more people than ever are applying to vote by mail, and election officials are urging voters to make a plan for submitting their ballots. For those choosing to vote in person, the Chicago Board of Elections says safety measures will be in place. And the National Museum of Mexican Art in Pilsen receives a $3.5 million grant. The museum is one of 20 arts and cultural organizations across the country that received grants as part of the Ford Foundation's America's Cultural Treasures initiative to help them survive the COVID pandemic. The museum's founder and president, Carlos Tortolero, says the grant will help the museum continue to remain free to the public.
We're a free museum, and we're free because I believe as well too, that everyone should have access to the arts. When I was a kid, all the museums were free, no more. And I think it's very important that the arts be accessible.
And for the latest news and information on any story, check out WTTW.com/news. Up next, two Latinos supporting Donald Trump's bid for re-election on the reasons behind their votes.
Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices is made possible in part by CIBC and by the support of these donors.
The political power of Latinos continues to grow nationwide. In 2020, a record 32 million Latinos are expected to vote, representing the largest non-white voting bloc in American history. And though it's been traditionally a voting bloc that has leaned left, President Donald Trump has been able to count on the vote of about 30% of Latino voters, according to national polls. And in battleground states like Florida, his support among Latinos runs even higher. Joining us to talk about why they're voting 4 more years for President Trump are Maria Vasquez, chairwoman of Champaign County Young Republicans, and Enrique Perez, a supporter of President Trump. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's start with the dueling town halls this week. How did President Donald Trump do Thursday night? Let's start with you, Maria.
Well, I think that he did great. I'm going to be honest, I did not watch the Biden town hall because it was on at the same time, and I really wanted to see what the questions that were being asked to President Trump. I believe that he did a good job standing firm on his convictions and speaking and answering the questions. I believe there was a little bit of a pushback with the moderator. I would have liked to see her allow him answer the questions without interruptions, but I think that the public could see that, it was a little bit of a bias.
Enrique, what are your thoughts?
I was not happy with the way Savannah Guthrie really went at him in a very negative sort of way in comparison to the way George Stephanopoulos basically gave Joe Biden softball questions. But I've gotten used to that's how the media tends to act towards President Trump. He definitely held his own. He stood his ground. He answered the questions, and it got very combative. And you can see where, depending on which news you watch, the commentary on how they commented on it. On some channels, it was, oh, President Trump did horrible. He didn't answer the questions, but then on others, he did well. But as I saw it, it's just a continuing trend of how the media really mistreats him.
Maria, last time you were on our program a month ago, you pointed to the Hispanic Prosperity Initiative executive order that President Trump signed back in July as an indicator of his efforts on behalf of the Latino community. What have we seen resulting from that executive order?
Well, in the personal level, I have spoken to a lot of Latinos within the community that have experienced a benefit of this executive order. They have seen a lot more training at their jobs, a lot more apprenticeship opportunities, and a lot of information being sent to them for their kids' educational value, that, there is more of an attention being given to children's education and to make sure that they do prosper in the workforce.
COVID-19 was part of the conversation at the town hall, as it was in the first debate, as it surely will be next week's debate as well. Enrique, COVID infection rates in Chicago's predominantly Latino communities are the highest in the city. What are your thoughts on the Trump administration's performance on the COVID crisis so far, and what do you believe he'll do to help keep Latino workers safe?
In regards to COVID, or in regards to the Latino community and communities of color, minority communities in general, they suffer disproportionately from health issues across the spectrum, whether it's heart attacks, diabetes, and access to good medical care. So when you have that situation, part of it rooted in poverty, part of it rooted in just not having a concentration of healthcare assets in one place, with just existing health issues, when COVID came along, it was sadly and unfortunately bound to affect communities of color, minority communities in a disproportionate way. The true remedy for something like that is to basically improve the situation of those communities. And a lot of that starts with an economy that's better for everybody, that they can have access to better treatments. I think that over time, as a vaccine comes out for COVID, apparently it's going to be happening within the less than a few months, and better treatments are put onto the market, into the healthcare system for COVID. I think that's going to affect anybody that comes down with this horrible disease.
Now, Maria, let's talk a little bit about what Enrique mentioned, the economy, which has been a strong point for the president. The Trump administration is saying the economic recovery is V-shaped. Data indicates that people with low incomes are not recovering at the same rate as people with high incomes, and Latinos, again, are highly represented in hospitality and service jobs. Do you think the administration is doing enough to save those jobs?
Absolutely. I think prior that we got hit with the COVID pandemic, he was working on tariffs with different countries to make sure that we got a fair shot at imports and exports. He brought a lot of jobs to the United States that were thinking of moving and outsourcing in other countries. So he did make plans with different companies to make sure that those jobs remain here. And those are factory jobs. Those are food processing jobs that the Latino communities that are going to benefit from, because we are the people that are working those jobs, and our people are doing that. So, with the whole COVID pandemic, yeah, I think that the economy, everything came to a halt. But I do have confidence that, if the president is reelected, he is going to continue fighting for this country and make sure that those jobs remain here.
So with the time we have left, about 30 seconds, I want to ask both of you. In my house, my father is a Republican. So like Republicans, he'll be voting for President Trump. My wife, Adriana, is a Democrat. And like Democrats, of course, she will be voting for Biden. Now, I'm an independent. In 30 seconds, tell us what you think President Trump needs to say in next week's debate in order to win over that 6% of independents, especially in those battleground states that could make the difference one way or the other for both President Trump or Biden. Maria, first with you.
I think that he has to have a concise plan as to the recovery of COVID, give specific examples of families that have suffered economically through this pandemic, and target those specific families and those jobs to make sure that they feel confident that come November, they will have those jobs, that they will have health care, that they will have education for their children. And he is the only candidate that does fight for the American dream.
Enrique, you, 15 seconds. What does the president need to do to win over independent voters?
It's all about the economy. It's about getting the country back on track. There is an argument as to whether shutting down the country as much and as prolonged as it was a successful thing to do, because a lot of businesses have permanently gone under, and that's particularly affected Latinos, because there was an article that recently came out that showed that pre-COVID, under the Trump economy, Latinos were leading the way and starting small independent businesses, privately owned, and really having a go at it. We have to get back to the pre-COVID economy where.
And thank you, Enrique.
Basically boom.
Thank you. Sorry, we've run out of time. COVID-19, the economy, certainly very important on voters' minds and in the minds, of course, of Latinos that have been most affected by both. Maria, Enrique, muchísimas gracias. Thank you for joining us at Chicago Tonight Latino Voices.
Muchas gracias. Que estén bien.
And be sure to visit our website for a whole slew of voting resources, including a map of early voting locations and voting frequently asked questions that's available in English y Español. Plus, our WTTW News 2020 Voter Guide that offers special election coverage and details on specific races. All of these resources are at WTTW.com/voterguide. Police department data indicates 20% of domestic violence victims in Chicago are Latina. And now, as victims are trapped at home with their abusers during the pandemic, the problem could be worse than we know. Earlier this month, Brandis Friedman spoke with 2 social service workers about what they're hearing in Chicago's Black and brown communities. Here's another look.
The pandemic has forced many of us to stay inside a lot more for the past 7 months. The mantra from city leaders has been stay home, save lives. But for some, home isn't always a safe space, as many social service agencies report a spike in domestic violence during the pandemic. Joining us to discuss domestic violence during what is Domestic Violence Awareness Month are Jose Lopez, the office director at Mil Mujeres, which offers a number of services to members of the Latino community, and Kamisha Jones, the founder of Sista Afia, a mental wellness organization. Welcome to both of you to Chicago Tonight. Kamisha, let's start with you, please. What have you been hearing from clients who have to navigate this violence during the pandemic?
Well, first I will say that relationship violence, intimate partner violence is very common with the women that we serve. We predominantly serve Black women, and Black women are 35% more likely to encounter intimate partner violence. So just the difficulties of having to be at home with someone who could be unpredictable or possibly harmful and violent, being able to figure out how to be able to escape or to flee that relationship is even more difficult with the COVID-19 pandemic. And in addition to that, just the mental health impact of having to feel forced to stay in a relationship, especially when there are compounding different events that are happening in our society that can cause a lot of stress and worry.
How has not being able to meet with them in person affected those clients and the work that you do?
When people come to our office for therapy, they're able to have a space that's safe and dedicated towards their healing. And being in a teletherapy environment or a video environment, the place that maybe they were trying to get some separation from is no longer there, right? So it's been a little bit harder as far as working with people who are coming to us for therapy and are also in intimate partner violent relationships, is not being able to have that separation, which is really difficult.
Jose Lopez, your organization has tried to move a lot of your work online, like using DocuHub and other services. How are clients adapting to that shift?
It's been a little bit of a learning curve for all of us here, especially the community that we serve mostly entails lower income Spanish speaking communities where a lot of the technology is new to them. So it's been a lot of educating, working with their children, trying to help their parents understand computers, how to send emails, even setting up email for the first time. So it's been a little bit of a learning curve, but I think we've managed, and we're giving our clients skills that they're gonna need in the future.
And, financial dependency is also a factor in an abusive relationship. How has the pandemic exacerbated that?
I feel that especially people, there's oppression where they're financially completely in control of the household, and that's done purposefully to keep them dependent on the abuser. And now that everything is kind of slowed down and there's a lot of less jobs, the opportunities can kind of seem like now it's going to be a lot harder for me to get out of this situation, knowing that even if my abuser were to allow me to find a job, there are less jobs to go around. So I think that has caused a lot of people to see the light at the end of the tunnel kind of fade away a little bit, at least for the time being.
That's unfortunate. So, Kamisha, you just mentioned this, that, Black women are more likely to experience intimate partner violence. You said as much as 35% more than other races. Why is there such a disparity?
Well, if we look at just misogyny and the lack of care and value that our society places on Black women, I think that is definitely a larger reason for that. But then in addition to that, just systemic issues. So feeling comfortable to report information to the police or other helping professionals because of discrimination that people might experience, or believing like, oh, I'm a strong Black woman. And so people not taking your pain and the challenges that you're experiencing seriously. And then I also think that that there is a lack of attention to violence against women just in general. I think we know this is an issue, but in our mainstream culture, there's violence against women everywhere. And I definitely think that is also a contributor. And then also just to highlight that people who are perpetrators of abuse were also likely to have been abused themselves. So if that's an issue, within the Black community, that could also be impacting the higher incidence or the higher rates of encountering intimate partner violence.
And so also, it's an issue. There are other issues affecting the Latino community as well. Jose, before the pandemic, we know that Latinas were paid 47% less than white men on average. Obviously, there's job instability that has been exacerbated by the pandemic. And you just talked about the lack of a safety net sometimes being there. What have you heard from clients who are dealing with this?
Yes, this has been absolutely devastating in our community, especially since the areas that have been hardest hit tend to be service, where restaurants, cleaning has been, like, especially in like hotels and things like that. So it's very, very difficult. But I do want to stress the fact that even if financial instability is something that's keeping people from reaching out, there are many organizations that are here to help them. If our organization doesn't offer a service that they need specifically, we know many organizations that will be able to help them, and reach out. Even if finances are keeping you, or there's plenty of resources that they're out there and they're willing to help.
Again, that was Brandis Friedman in a conversation recorded earlier on Chicago Tonight. This summer, Claudio Velez was thrilled to open his restaurant, Tamale Guy Chicago. The business is the culmination of decades of hard work from Velez, a former food vendor affectionately known as the Tamale Guy. But weeks into opening, Velez contracted COVID-19 and was hospitalized for 35 days before returning home earlier this month. Tamale Guy Chicago co-owner Kristen Vega updated WTTW News on Friday morning, saying the restaurant has been open since September 9th with takeout only. No one else has contracted COVID that works at the restaurant. Claudio is at home recovering and will be there for some time. We are all in good spirits and are just eager to continue to provide everyone with tamales and other specials. Chicago Tonight's Evan Garcia visited Velez during his restaurant's opening day as part of the WTTW Chicago Portrait Series.
For the past 20 years or so, Claudio Velez has been known as the Tamale Guy, a food vendor selling tamales to Chicago's bar patrons. Now, through some extraordinary circumstances we'll soon explain, he has his own restaurant.
Me siento muy emocionado y le doy gracias a Dios y a todas las personas que me ayudaron para hacer posible el sueño americano.
Claudio arrived in America 28 years ago from Acapulco, Mexico. He moved from San Diego to Chicago, where a friend named Fernando taught him how to make and sell tamales bar to bar.
Everybody. Only 3-4 minutes in the bar, I go to vámonos. 100 bar. Every night.
Armed with a cooler full of tamales, Claudio's business became well known within Chicago's bar scene. A tamale tracker Twitter account with more than 7,000 followers announced his location at any given time.
You have tamales?
In 2016, the food site Eater went searching for him. At the time, he asked to stay anonymous. With COVID-19 shutting down Chicago's nightlife in March, Claudio had to adapt. He started making home deliveries.
Hacía dinero, pero lo agarraba mi dinero y ahí iba quedando.
But the home deliveries didn't last long. After reportedly receiving several complaints, the city of Chicago sent Claudio a cease and desist letter for operating without a retail food license. Claudio was crushed.
Me sentí muy triste cuando me dijeron que yo ya parara de vender, porque alguien se había mandado como 10 correos que yo no tenía la licencia y ese alguien me denunció ante ellos.
When word got out that Claudio's livelihood was stopped, the community rallied around him online.
Y la comunidad americana se propuso hacerme un GoFundMe para ponerme el restaurante y lo lograron. Me juntaron $35,000 y con ese dinero y un poquito de dinero que yo tenía y con la ayuda de mi amigo Pierre que también puso dinero, compramos todo lo que tenemos aquí y todo es de nosotros. No hay nada de él y mío.
The restaurant, located in Ukrainian Village, is called Tamale Guy Chicago, and its opening day was a hit.
Thank you so much. Oh, you're very welcome.
Co-owner Pierre Vega has worked in restaurants since he was 15 years old. He's known Claudio for more than 10 years.
Yesterday, we were here from 7 in the morning until about 8 at night just making tamales, and we had about 3,000 tamales on hand, and I mean, pretty much sold out of those within the first hour.
Pierre views the city's cease and desist letter as a blessing in disguise.
Ultimately, if it never happened, we wouldn't be here right now, which is, in my honest opinion, I think exactly where he wants to be.
Es más bueno para mí porque ya estoy tranquilo, estoy trabajando con todos los permisos de la ciudad, nadie me va a molestar y estamos bien.
In the kitchen, it's a family affair, with Claudio's sister Maria helping the 55-year-old make pork tamales. The restaurant is takeout only for now and sells a variety of tamales.
Vamos a tener tamales de pollo en salsa verde, tamales de queso con rajas en salsa verde, tamales de puerco en salsa roja y vamos a tener los tradicionales son.
Claudio and his partner have big dreams for their new business.
And we plan to definitely do a lot of business out of here, and in hopes to one day, create a tamale factory and hopefully sell Claudio's Tamale Guy tamales in your grocer's freezer or fridge.
Seguir creciendo, poner más y más y más, hasta que yo llegue a ser como el Papa John's. ¿Cómo se llama?
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Evan Garcia.
Que rico. You can visit our website to learn more about Velez's story and for a link to the Tamale Guy Chicago website to order food online. I certainly will be doing that. Now to Brandis Friedman and a look at what's on tap for tomorrow.
Ugo, we've got a great show tomorrow on Chicago Tonight, Black Voices, an exit interview with the outgoing highest-ranking Black woman in Chicago police history, a Southside native turned trauma surgeon who turned his focus to safety, and a look at the horrific history of racism in Lovecraft Country. That's tomorrow night at 6.
And that's our show for this Saturday night. For all of us here at Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, I'm Hugo Balta. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. Stay healthy, stay safe. Muy buenas noches.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is proud of their attorneys selected for the 2020 Illinois Super Lawyers List.